for blood clot or for the steroids. Those are actually quite commonly used and cheap, but never used in the respiratory diseases or flu like this. So we know better how to treat patients at what time and how to allocate the resources so that the hospitals can quickly scale up the capacity for COVID. So I think those are all the good experience and knowledge we gained.
So how would a Biden presidency change the approach to the coronavirus?
I just actually yesterday I read through Biden's COVID-19 strategy. I like it a lot. I think it hit all the right targets. It talked about increase the capacity on tracing and testing, and it talked about a vaccines distribution plan. It even talked about re-engage with WHO and engage with many other countries, including China, in terms of global health and pandemic preparedness. So I think these will be helpful. My only concern is that it might be a little bit too late, but I still think it's better than nothing, even when we have seen the virus already affecting so many people in this country and has been reported in many states and county. But I hope that I have this confidence in changing the dynamic.
We certainly could use it. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
There's so many reasons to love sports, but one thing stands out: numbers.
Straight from the big leagues.
Which is the biggest team in the English Premier League?
It is the numbers that make them stand out. Even when the muscles define the game, the numbers add value to the stats. Every swing comes with a number.
On Sports Center, we go behind the game. On Sports Center, we go behind the game for the numbers. Metropol Sports Center, at this time, only on Metropol TV.
Chief Justice would like to have a situation where the government is assured that under my watch, fraudulent claims will be carefully handled, scrutinized. At the same time, where claims are deserving of merit, deserving of award, I will be the first person and always the last person to defend the judicial officer concerned. So create a situation where everybody is comfortable. Everybody says, well, if we have that head of the judiciary there, then let's take the judgment, whether it's painful or not. So I want to bring a situation where we sanitize the creeping image of unchecked corruption in the judiciary.
Yeah, now I'm trying to go beyond that. I hear you and I associate with what you're saying, but I'm talking about now the public interest component, where you find that sometimes there's the rights that would benefit the public, but there's also the component of the private right. Say, for instance, like public land, that has been not properly, granted to a party. They claim that I'm the third owner, I'm the fourth owner. But again, there's the institution, the public interest that has to also be taken into consideration. Probably there's the road, there's, like the Metropol case where they'll say, yes, it's government land, but we've been here in generations. I'm just trying to understand what to guide you without going into how you would rule, because I agree with you. Sometimes it will be difficult for you to take a firm position. Just how do you balance it as you develop, the jurisprudence?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. I think the Constitution is clear. Public rights override, public interest overrides. Where there is need to compulsorily acquire, compensation must be paid promptly and at the required level of compensation. But on the issue, and I don't want to say too much because there's a big trend of these cases in court. I generally take the view that somebody who has stolen something is incapable of giving somebody good title. And the person who then is deceived and buys the second, third title should have recourse to the person who sold it to him. So that has been my general attitude about these competing claims on public land and so on.
Okay. Now, let me come to the issue of the challenges that we face every day as advocates in courts. But you see, we as advocates, we represent the public, so to speak. Now, I know you've mentioned them generally, but now, I don't know, what are the three key challenges that we are now facing that, you said that the ship is basically coming to a stop. You mentioned about IT and all that.
Yes.
I'm interested in knowing how you'd go specifically into resolving those issues, so that even as you resolve, because there will be those that short, medium term, and long term. There are others that you may not even be able to handle unless, of course, you are funded. But there are those low-hanging fruits, the immediate things that you think you can be able to deal with. And for instance, I would want to hear about this issue of, say, like a transfers. If you come in here, how you'd handle those kind of things, like the transfers in the institution, how you'd be able to deal with the issues of optimal use of the resources that you have, including the human capital, the efficiency issues, because they are ripe issues. Sometimes you may be talking about very big things, but they also the small things that could make a big difference without necessarily even requiring financial resources. So about some three key things that you would do that would quickly make us now start moving in the right trajectory.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I start with the low-hanging fruit, the one that is free of charge. As much as a lot of stuff has been posted about me, I also read what is supposed to be relevant within this conversation. For example, the memorandum submitted to the Commission, not to me, to the Commission by the KMJA. That is the Kenya Judges and Magistrates Association, whom Commissioner represents on this commission. It is just about leadership. It's just about how that cadre of officers feel taken for granted, how they felt neglected by the immediate past administration, how they felt their matters of transfers were dealt with in a less than humane manner. I have the memo. It's a whole catalogue of things written with, I'd say, the pain of young professionals. They talk about transfers, not considering the age of their families. And I understand that to mean that whilst a few of us here can, because of our age, can work in a different town from their spouse, at a younger age, it is difficult. And they also deal with the transfer policy. I'm aware there are transfer policies, I mean personally, and you would understand why. I'm aware there's a transfer policy in the Court of Appeal. And I have seen how it has affected my own family. But now that there is a transfer policy, anyone's family, and mine included, could plan, because we would have the presence of the matriarch in the house for 2 years, and thereafter she wouldn't be there. I mean, whatever years, whether it's 1 year, 3 years, whatever. So if there isn't a transfer policy, and I'm going into the realm of speculation, it is suggested in that memo that there isn't. A transfer policy should very quickly be developed in the High Court and in the magistracy, and which includes the Qadis, and then it is strictly adhered to, bar the exceptional cases where, of course, for disciplinary reasons or for arresting bad situations, transfers deserve some immediacy. So the human resource issues for existing staff are low-hanging fruit. What it requires is a caring, feeling, walkabout leader. Walkabout, just going everywhere to understand the problem and attending to it as fast as possible. It reminds me, as I said earlier, of my tenure when I walked into the state law office in the Department of Public Prosecutions. And the smallest of things change people's attitude towards you, towards their own work. I mean, these days, I noticed there's a lot of food in public service. You go to every corner, there's a mandazi, and if you are in the presence of the commissioners, you might be invited for lunch, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of it. When I was DPP, a small story, the office felt very motivated by the end of the year, and they said they wanted a Christmas lunch. And I said, well, I'll write a memo to the accounting officer and ask if they can sponsor a Christmas lunch for the department that had done very well. And my memo was rejected. My request was rejected. And they said, but we still want a Christmas lunch. And I said, okay, let's do a deal. Raise half the money, and I'll raise half the money as your boss. And the day of the lunch, my personal assistant came and said, they didn't raise any money, but they still want lunch. I had to buy the lunch with no problem at all. But what I'm trying to illustrate is it looks like there is a cadre of officers in the judiciary that feel a little neglected. And that word I use reservedly, a little neglected. That is a low-lying fruit. We need to attend to them, attend to the small things that affect their workspace. And it could just be showing them that you appreciate them. The other things that now come to my mind, more substantive, and some might be short-term. You mentioned output and so on, and backlog. Well, maybe we can leave it then. You can ask the next question, and then maybe I'll deal with the bigger issues. You were talking about short-term and medium-term.
About equality, treating everybody fairly, whether high or low, which is good. Now, when it comes to the law, sometimes if we look at the public, the public gets the impression that, even when it comes to the application of law, the high and mighty will be treated differently. The low, will be treated differently. Even when it comes to how bail will be handled, how judgment will be handled, their cases generally, they'll say that it seems like the rich and powerful will get away with issues, but if you are a small guy, you are treated so harshly. Now, I do not know, again, if you were to become our Chief Justice, how you'd be able to go about in ensuring that the institution is seen to be one that is treating everybody the same, even in application of law. Of course, you're not the one who will be determining cases because you'll have many people below you, but you are the leader. At the end of the day, when things are going wrong, they'll be saying it's the Chief Justice who has this institution that only serves the rich and powerful. How would you go about it in restoring that confidence?
Thank you, and this is another good point that requires collaboration at a much higher level. The biggest, what you have just described about rich and poor is it can simply be described as corruption, because the big man or the richer man gets his services, and it is presumed by the smaller man that he has more money. It's not that the system turns a sort of a control button so that it attends to people who have more money and less. No, it simply means those who pay under the table, those who are able to manipulate the system, get their services. You may have seen that in my CV, which I haven't had the occasion to look at. I, at some point, was, and I might be wrong on this, in 2002, I was a member of the National Steering Committee on Anti-Corruption. It is probably time to go back to that point where all arms of government recognize this problem as a fairly acute problem, or a crisis problem, and begin to deal with that. And of course, when you deal with it, it cascades down to the public servants, that everybody is watching them, that you cannot favor anyone over another. You must treat everybody equally. It will be a tall order for the judiciary to turn this around by itself, but it can try. It can try. It can have, of course, mechanisms where people can report this type of discrimination. Yeah, but you know, this requires collaboration with entire government.
Which brings me to the issue of even in our profession, you know, this is something that's a complaint that keeps arising, where some who are more senior can get away with anything and everything. The junior ones have a very rough time, you know, making even sometimes even making their way with, you know, in the institution of the judiciary when it comes to representation, you know. How again would you go about it to ensure that, you know, and this is something that is alive among lawyers generally, where they want everybody also to be treated equally when it comes now to representing their respective clients, regardless of their status, regardless of who they are. Not to say that we don't respect the seniors, of course, that title you possess is one that we all aspire for. But when it comes to representation, everybody is treated the same.
Everybody is treated the same. The lawyers are treated the same, or the clients are treated the same?
You know, the lawyers represent the clients.
Okay.
So you want these lawyers to also be treated the same when it comes now to the services within the institution of the judiciary. There is no lawyer who is given more prominence than the other when it comes to access to justice for their clients.
Macharia, you're putting me, Commissioner, you're putting me on the spot regarding the status called senior counsel.
No, I'm not talking about the senior counsel role. I mean, you know, there are many senior lawyers who are not necessarily having the SC title.
I thank you for that clarification. But I want to say this, and about senior counsel, and I hope they are watching. The privilege of being conferred with the status by the President on recommendation of your peers is one that any senior counsel should exercise with utmost humility. With utmost humility. So that if you go to court and the judge or the magistrate does not call you out, your seniority requires that you simply wait your turn. I've had this discussion with many of them, and the true seniors, I call them the true seniors, who appreciate the fact that with age, with seniority, with experience comes a certain responsibility. All accept that. There are a few senior counsel who go jumping up and down in the court and disrupting proceedings whenever they walk into a court, and they give the senior status a bad name. Now, let me come to the profession of senior lawyers, profession of advocacy. We have a tradition of respecting seniors, and Mr. Njeru, Commissioner Njeru, for the time I've known you, which is many years, you have always referred to me as senior, even though I didn't have the status. But because I am, you're senior. This is part of the tradition that has gone, been passed down over the centuries, that allow advocates to be referred to as a noble or an honorable profession. But I'm sad to say that has watered down to almost zero. Today, the lawyers who practice on social media carry the day. When I say carry the day, not necessarily in court, but they take all their arguments out, They browbeat judges, magistrates and judges. When they get their orders, they call the particular magistrate or judge the best. When they don't get their orders, they denigrate the judicial officer. They call them corrupt. They call them gatekeepers. They call them all sorts of nasty names, agents of the state. It's a time for reflection for the profession. There are many solutions to this. Maybe some will involve legislation, but the bar is at crossroads. And in that quarrel, in that melee, in that confusion, these impressions that you're talking about come about. They come about. And if you look at the profession a little closer, it's not even seniors versus so-called juniors, and seniors having access. It is a question of those who go around bullying everybody that seem to have the day in court. We need to work on that. The judiciary is the first place that needs to work on it. It needs to slow these people down. It needs to respond to these people. And for example, when an advocate, no matter who he is, no matter how senior he is, whether or not he has 1 million so-called followers, and I put it in quotes because in those situations, they probably don't exist. It's all a virtual world they live in. When you call out a judge and say the judge is corrupt, the Supreme Court is corrupt, I am hoping and expecting that one day, and it might already have happened, I don't know, but I hope the JSC can summon such people and ask them to explain themselves. That way, the profession will clean itself out and be respected.
What I'm looking for, SC, is because see, there's also the debate of the young lawyers actually who also complained to me directly as their representative that they seem to have that when the judiciary is handling them, they are treated differently from the seniors. In terms of the seniors can get away with murder, the juniors. So I'm interested in hearing you as a Chief Justice. How will you drive the message home with the judiciary so that this access to everybody, whether low, whether high, both the public and also these lawyers?
Commissioner, that problem is as old as the profession. When I was growing up in the profession, and all of us were growing up in the profession, there is a tendency to accord the seniors, because of their wisdom and experience and all the rest of it, a little more time. And it becomes a challenge on the part of upcoming lawyers to attain that status or that respect from courts. And when I was a junior state counsel in Kisumu, as much as I was starting out, I made my cases, I made my reputation, and whether or not I was working for the government, I earned my respect. So it's perhaps something we can work on at the JTI whenever there is training. We can ask the judges to be a little soft with regard to perceived preferences, but at the same time, what do they have at the legal profession? It's called what do they have? What we attend, the continuous legal education. I think some of our instructors should be able to guide the younger lawyers on what it takes to earn your space, earn your respect before any court. But otherwise, if it's a question of being there and simply expecting respect to accrue to you, that is probably impossible.
But I hope you'd also create a platform to engage lawyers of all cadres.
I recall fondly how Chief Justice Willie Mutunga would be invited to the annual events, the annual events of the Law Society, and I'd be happy if I was a Chief Justice to, spend some time discussing it.
Okay. Now, my last 3 questions. Now, question number 1. You see, if you look at the common law in UK, because this is one of the countries that does not have a written constitution to date. And the development of the law was generally through the common law, and that's what we even studied in the university and all that. But it was able to shape the country, the commerce and industry, the way, life is, the way people live in the UK. And you can say generally that even that law has been applied in most of the Commonwealth jurisdictions. Now, I don't know if you became our Chief Justice, how you'd go about shaping development in this country in so many spheres using jurisprudence, where we can use the law not necessarily to take over the responsibilities of a parliament, but we're able to interpret the law and develop jurisprudence in a manner that you can see that the country, the judiciary, is playing its rightful role in development of the country. Whether it's human rights, whether it's economic development, the thinking of people and all that, because sometimes the other arms could fail in taking the appropriate steps in shaping how the human society is evolving.
This is something that has cropped up in one form or another in the questions that I've already answered. If it is left entirely to the Supreme Court, it may extend to activism. I think it is more collaborative and should be more collaborative than that. The gaps in the law should be legislated first and contributed to by all stakeholders, of course led by the Honorable the Attorney General, so that the law is written clearly, it is applied in a very easy manner by the courts, and we head in a certain direction. I see the danger of leaving it all to the courts and then having this discussion all the time about activism and whether or not it was what was required or intended by the framers of the Constitution. It is a collaborative idea. It's an excellent idea. I thought you were going to ask me about developing indigenous jurisprudence, and I have noticed in one of the cases where Chief Justice Willie Mutunga was talking about, which was the gender issue, the 2/3 gender issue. Even though he mentioned it, he promptly thereafter continued to quote English cases. So it's not that we wipe out all common law decisions and precedents and disregard them. I think we can all necessary modifications, and we will proceed in the right way for the betterment of society, and less issues of interpretation. I do agree the judiciary, I do agree the law can play and should play a great role in improving the socio-economic aspects of our country.
Okay, my second last question. Now, there's this issue that keeps arising when it comes to opposition such as yours of the Chief Justice. Should it be somebody from the outside? Should it be somebody from the inside? Because the judiciary will all agree also has its own dynamics. Not that I have any position, but I just need you to be able to explain to us. And you see now, when I was looking at somebody like John Roberts, the current Chief Justice of U.S. Supreme Court, and what I noted is that he clerked at some point in time, worked as the Attorney Generals, just like yourself. In fact, I see a bit of that similarity between you and him. Then worked in the White House as a counsel. Then went back to private practice 14 years, argued 39 cases in the Supreme Court. Then again appointed as a Court of Appeal judge in the DC Circuit Court. Then nominated by, I think it was George Bush who nominated him to go to the Supreme Court, but William Rehnquist died before the process was over, and then he was nominated as Chief Justice. So I don't know whether that's, you could find that probably could disadvantage you in terms of that you're a very good lawyer, there's no doubt about that, probably one of the very best in the country in terms of, understanding the law and arguing your cases with vigor. But perhaps again, because of lacking the judicial experience, somebody could probably argue that it could disadvantage you in terms of the learning curve and understanding the dynamics of the institution, and probably jump to the Supreme Court first, then, become our Chief Justice. I don't know. I would be interested in hearing your response. Not to say that I have an opposition on it, but just for you to be able to satisfy this commission that notwithstanding the lack of the judicial experience from the inside, of course you've said that you've related a lot with the judiciary, that it still does not disadvantage you.
Thank you very much for that very good question, Commissioner Njeru. The debate about the inside, the insiders versus the outside. Let me go back a little. My favorite example is when I went back to the DPP's office. I was an outsider. I might have started my early life there, knew enough about it, especially where the shoe pinches. And when I came back, I wasn't asking what is the problem. I was simply demanding a solution. I was going to the solution. And there's a small little dimension there as well. We had problems agreeing on terms about my terms of service. And there was an interesting debate because I was taking over from a person who had been at the rank of chief magistrate in this court and had become the DPP. Whilst there was the Honorable Bernard Chunga, who had been a DPP and had moved to become the Chief Justice, and his terms of service at that time were Court of Appeal terms. Listen to the analogy. When I came in and somebody said, here's the job, this is what you will take. And I said, no. And they said, well, why are you fussing? You wanted a job, take a job. And I said, I'm not here for the money. I'm here for doing a job, and I will do it at the level that it is required to be done. It took 5 months for them to see my point, and they gave me the terms. It wasn't much money, by the way. When they increased it to Court of Appeal, as you all know, it's much more even now. But it was the principle. And at some point, in a meeting with the office of the president, not the president, I'm talking about the representatives, when they wouldn't move, I said, then in that case, I'm prepared to leave and I will work with you as a consultant. And they relaxed a little. I got what I wanted. And just to show you the nature or the kind of person I am, they offered me a permanent and pensionable job. I said, if I can't do it in 3 years, I don't need to be here. And they gave me a contract instead. But that contract was too long. I was sacked in 2 years. Now, I come to the inside-outside discussion in the judiciary. I take my hat off here without any reservation to Chief Justice Emeritus Willie Mutunga for everything he has achieved. Sitting here today, the credit for transformation goes to him unreservedly. And why was he able to achieve the impossible? Because he went in there with a clean sheet, listened to everybody, and could very easily say, then in that case, if that doesn't work, we drop it. As against that, there is the insider candidate, for example. He's done the same thing the same way for 35 years. When you ask him to remove the glass in front of him, and he's had it there for 35 years, he says, but how can I do that? How can I do that? So whenever an institution is in crisis, and I believe this one is, a crisis of confidence, crisis of a leadership problem with vis-a-vis other arms of government, the best solution is the outsider who simply comes to ask what are considered silly questions. Why aren't we solving the problem? What is so difficult about X or Y? So this is one of the reasons that informs my application. I should make it very clear that had this judiciary that we all depend on, you got it right, we as practitioners, we as a country all depend on, if I felt it was running perfectly in the right hands, I would have been the last person to apply for the job. Because at my age, I'm going to 60, I enjoy my peace and quiet as a private citizen. Why am I coming here? And whether or not I am a good Chief Justice, I will not please everybody. I will get, as already has happened. People throw stones at you, idlers and other people who have nothing better to do. That is the nature of public service. But I believe at this point in time, you would do very well to have a courageous outsider with the necessary experience. I hope I've answered your question.
And you've answered. Now, my last question. The chair is very strict with time, so that to strict.
Maybe I should add to that last question. And who is also courageous enough to get rid of the cartels that are stalking the court corridors, that are stalking the administration of justice, the brokers for justice. They're all billionaires. They don't even charge legal fees. They're lawyers, many of them. They just charge brokerage fees. People who think they own the courts, and without them the courts can't function. That is what the courts are facing right now. The judiciary is facing that. People are losing hope. You talked about young lawyers losing hope whenever they're in a court and a senior counsel is addressing the court. There are many senior lawyers who now know if they are up against certain lawyers, they don't stand a chance. So what we need is a bit of a shake-up here. We need to move to the next level. We need to restore the transformation journey onto the right trajectory.
Okay, thank you. Now, my last question, if you become the Chief Justice, you'll be our chair here. You'll be the one now to handle this commission. And some of us, including myself, are also difficult when you are fighting, of course, for a position that, you are coming to bring issues that for the people who have elected you as the commissioner is only natural. And also our profession, we also generally also difficult. So if I don't perform, they put me under pressure. So I also become, difficult here. Now, you will be the leader of the entire institution of the judiciary, the president of the Supreme Court, chairing the National Council of Administration of Justice, So all these different roles that require you to wear different hats. Now, of course, you are aware that there are those who have questioned your temperament. Personally, I've never had any issue with dealing with you, so, it's not about me. But, we are all not the same. Now, there's an opportunity for you probably to answer that question regarding how do you go about it to ensure, because in the CS in the past, you've narrated how you are the DPP, didn't agree with them. You've projected a journey. So I don't know what kind of an assurance you'd give that you'd still be able to, in all these different roles, notwithstanding the questions being raised about your temperament in terms of, handling all these positions, that you'll still be able to do it and let the institutions run, because once you become the Chief Justice, the issue of 2 years like in the DPP does not arise. Removing a CJ is a tall order. You have to run the course. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Njeru. First of all, my temperament is a very calm one. And I don't think there's anyone I know, perhaps maybe I know one or two people who have ever seen me get to the point where I have lost my temper. I don't lose my temper. I'm very patient. I'm very, very patient. I give you the classic example. The false accusations by Nelson Harvey, the LSK chairman, suspended LSK president. He has been on my back for the last 1 year. I have not responded to him at all. Because why should I?
I'm not sure.
I'm trying to explain that if I'm giving you an example, I don't respond. But when I am finally forced to respond, when I say forced, the commissioner, the commission, the JSC commission required me to respond. And if you saw my response, I said it is only because you have asked me. Otherwise, I ignore lies, I ignore insults, I ignore all that. And then I will also tell you, each and every one of the minuscule complaints that have been thrown at me, I've seen some that are 1 line, some that are 2 lines. Apart from being false, I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to have done, but a narrative was being created that I am of short temperament. So I'm coming now to you as the JSC.
Yeah. JSC, Supreme Court, Judiciary, and NCAJ, particularly, those key offices.
So which one do you want me to start with in order of hierarchy? Let's start with the Supreme Court. I understand, and I've been listening to some of the questions asked about the Supreme Court. How would I bring collegiality? How will I bring a working relationship? I must tell you, Commissioner, that I am very good at that. I go the extra mile. When I want to bring harmony into a situation, I make the phone calls until I get the audience. I make the phone calls until people sit together. I have been instrumental in providing support for several legal groups, and including the Senior Counsel Bar, and I'm sure almost all of them will say that I'm a team builder. I pull people. I call them. I call somebody 20 times if I have to. So in the case of the Supreme Court, I know I am acquainted with all of those learned and very, very senior and eminently qualified individuals who serve on that bench. And if at all there is collegiality that is not, or the collegiality is not at the required level, I see myself as the right person to bring everyone to the table, working together, agreeing to disagree in a civil manner, so that the best jurisprudence comes out of that court. I delegate a lot. I delegate a lot in the sense that as soon as I got to the DPP's office as DPP, I dispersed my authority. I created sections and departments and allowed people to run with them and report to me only when they had to. So it's not, for me, empire building is not a trait I have. So that I consider, even though first in line, I consider that the smallest of the problems. The JSC is a bigger problem. The 9, 10 of you, or 11 when you finally become 11, are all appointed from big places, elected by powerful institutions, have offices in your own right, like the Honorable the Attorney General, and I can't come and dictate to you. I will have to build consensus around most issues. I have no qualms about being the big man and having to do it my way. If you ask me that, I often wondered why, when the Honorable former Chief Justice, who had complaints to make to the President or to the public, directed at the public, he stood on those steps alone. I often wondered where was Commissioner Macharia Njeru and team. What am I saying? My approach would be, we all as a commission have to agree, or by way of majority, have to agree that we have a problem, and then we would address, if we had to, address the public on that subject together. I believe that is the only way for an institution such as yours. In addition, and now that you ask, I even am aware that there is litigation between some of you. Priority, why does it have to be there? I think those are the things that have to be attended. We must stop this. We must speak with one voice, even when we disagree. So for me, it's a priority area. Nothing can be done without a supportive JSC. Nothing can be done without each one of the JSC members feeling appreciated and whatever. And to make this happen, count on me. I will call you 20 times, even if you are angry and you don't want to speak to somebody else. I will make you come to the table. So for me, that is easy. The NCAJ, National Council of Administration of Justice. I have worked with every one of those. There's quite a huge stakeholder list. So the ones in government, meaning the police, the DPP, the prisons, the probation office, and all those, even the LSK, and all of those, we will work as a team. For me, it's a question of winning, and it's not empire building, it's not having the big car on the block, it's not about trappings of power. I've had those things, they don't mean much to me. In fact, even when I was there, I didn't consider them much. My life didn't change at all.
Okay. I wish you well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jero. I will now request Honorable Commissioner, the Attorney General, to ask his question.
Thank you very much, Honorable Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Senior Counsel.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
We will continue from where Honorable Commissioner Macharia left off. You've likened the judiciary to a sinking ship.
Pardon me, a stuck ship.
Stuck ship.
Yes.
Thank you for the correction. And you have also identified various areas where you consider there is a crisis in the judiciary. And amongst them is the inadequacy of service delivery, the absence or the decline in confidence, leadership you mentioned, specifically vis-a-vis the executive. You mentioned the cartels and the brokers. So you have identified the problem. What you haven't told us specifically, in the event that your prayer is answered and you're now the Chief Justice and you have walked up the steps you keep referring to, just take 3 areas out of the list that you have enunciated upon and tell us specifically what steps, for instance, practical steps would you take to remove the cartels that you have alluded to bring about, you've mentioned collaboration with the executive and other stakeholders, but you haven't told us the recipe you're going to use. You've mentioned making telephone calls, but how are you going to solve this crisis? Telephone calls may not do it. Over to you, Senior Counsel.
Thank you very much, Honorable the Attorney General, Commissioner. Let's start with cartels, this insidious group or grouping that we talk about year in, year out. Again, I go back to my time as the DPP. Cartels move on when they can no longer feed and feast. So just the fact that the honeymoon is over, they are the first to know. But should they not move on? And I can tell you, and I will not state their names for the record here, they are known. So they will, through EACC and any other agency, be placed under a spotlight. And when the appropriate evidence is found, action will be taken. So that is the easier part. Of course, they'll fight back. And they'll call us names on social media. But we can live with that. Practical steps, talking about resources and everything else, telephone calls. My Lord, you've challenged me. Without resources, the judiciary cannot move. The ship is stuck. It's not broken. It's not leaking. It is not sinking. It simply needs to be unstuck. And it so happens the manner in which it is stuck can only be removed with, to begin with, the two issues that are no longer elephants in the room. They're the obvious things. Resolving the issue of the 41 judges and having a discussion about resources. Telephone call is a term of art. The last time I checked, it was a very good telephone in the Chief Justice's office that could reach very far. But that's not what will resolve the issue. In fact, it'll probably be used to ask for an appointment. But I would make it even better. Were I to be recommended and finally appointed to the office of Chief Justice, I will not leave State House until I've had a fair discussion on these issues. So I'm not talking about 100 days. I will come within close proximity of the President of this Republic on the day I am sworn in, and that is when the discussion will start. And I appreciate I might not come home with the results that anybody or even I want, but that is a starting point. So for me, it is what is possible, what is achievable, that I will do. So for me, Honorable Commissioner, it is simple. Maybe I go back to the question that Commissioner Macharia mentioned about insiders and outsiders. Outsiders are entitled to some bad manners in terms of protocol, and they can break the protocol and have the discussion sooner rather than later. When you grow up within a regimented system, when you are in an institution such as this, where there appears to be a corporate position taken on the two subjects, and I can tell you that there appears to be, because as I have come for this interview, I have had one or two friends tell me, I hope you are not going to say you will have a discussion with the head of state. And I said, why do you say that? And they said, well, everybody else thinks it's the wrong thing. And I said, well, I make up my own mind. I decide that in my function, in my role as coordinating with other arms of government, I am entitled to make the call, even without the permission of the JSC. But on the final decisions, I'll bring it back to the table and we'll have a discussion with the JSC. So for me, maybe I'm misreading the situation, but I see a fairly simple way out of this. When it comes to funding, Commissioner, Attorney General, we all know what's happening in the government. We all know their limited resources. I would like to go back a little to something that started when I was there, Vision 2030, which is the judiciary dovetails into Vision 2030. And there is an expectation by the year 2030, so much will have been done, with the judiciary having achieved so much. If those plans of Vision 2030 are adjustable, if the government's development programs can be what's the right word, compressed into 4 and only limited projects, it is unfair to imagine that the programs of the judiciary should not equally be affected. But, as has been said, what the judiciary takes is less than 1%. A case can be made for a little more.
Who would you engage?
In on this matter. It would flow from the first discussion I have with the head of state. And I then expect and would request that he authorizes or directs the Treasury to engage us. And once that is done, it'll flow, and finally we'll get to the Appropriations and Budgetary Committee in Parliament, who look at the estimates. But initially, it is the Treasury at the highest level, that is the Cabinet Secretary and his Permanent Secretary.
And if you found that the Cabinet Secretary would not see you?
I would stick to the first, I would go back to number one, meaning go down to number two. If you don't, you go back to the head of state. Because I believe he is the only person who can give direction on the subject of reallocation. Why do I say that? You look at the budget of the executive is a whopping, 95% of the entire revenue. So the only money that can be found or can be taken is from the executive. I have a little bit of experience with this.
Isn't that the function of the legislature?
What is this? The allocation? No.
Na kuambia sasa kila Alhamisi saa 1:30 ungana nasi ambapo tutakuwa tukiweza kuziangazia biashara ambazo zimeweza kuibuka wakati huu wa corona, na pia zile ambazo zimeweza kuathirika lakini zimeweza kujimudu, kujikuza wakati huu wa corona. Haya basi, ungana nami Tabitha Muthoni kila Alhamisi saa 1:30, show ikiwa ni The Hustle.
People ask me why business I am, and I normally tell them it's because of the numbers.
The deficit was 2.5 million, growing at 200,000 houses per year.
Is less than 1% of your turnover, then you pay 1% of your turnover.
To the GDP of the country, last week is 7.5%.
I mean, it has to be the numbers.
1.6, 1.7 trillion collection, I think it's a bit all of that.
40 to 50% of Kenyans are still using feature phones.
That only amounts to about 2.5% increase.
Numbers!
To around 3.4, which has further been reviewed downwards to around 1.9.
Which was to contribute to 24% of the GDP, now is expected to contribute about 18%.
You thought you was just gonna have a dream and a goal, and you were just gonna wake up and just walk into the sunset. You're like, dream, boom. It don't work like that. You have a dream and then life punks you. Life punks you and say, do you really want this? I'm gonna give your wife MS, do you really want this? 5 of your aunts gonna die of cancer, do you really want this? You gonna lose friends, do you really want this? Do you really want this? Cousins gonna abandon you. People that you used to be like this with gonna think you bougie and don't wanna deal with you. It's a part of it. But I paid too much. And so I'm telling you,